Thanks again to Clay Higgins. We're back today. It's time to induct another movie into the Chapo film canon. Our mission today, should we choose to accept it, is to harken back to the bygone era of 2007. George Bush was in his second term in office, but post-Hurricane Katrina, post-surge, people were really not feeling him as much as they did in the first Bush administration. People were getting to sour on the Iraq War, and thus it became time for Hollywood to finally take a stab at an action movie that asked the question, what if you could shoot Dick Cheney in the head?
Yeah, we had 1 year where you could make movies like this. Like, for most of the Bush administration, for the early part when it actually mattered, Hollywood was like, no, we actually want to kill every Muslim in the world too. They booed Michael Moore for being against the Iraq War. They were completely along with it. They literally have no courage of their convictions ever. But, when after 2005, 2006, when it became acceptable to have a very specific position against the Iraq War, where you're like, no, don't get me wrong, I was for it, but I think we're doing it wrong now. They made a bunch of shitty movies where Matt Damon is a good soldier.
Yeah, the Green
he's just
Zone.
Being betrayed. He's just being betrayed by the fat cats in Washington. But then there was it got so bad in America that there was about 1 year where you could make a big budget movie where you killed Dick Cheney. And they had to make him black for the conceit.
No. Dick Cheney.
They made Bill Frist black. Basically, they're like, all right, well, we still have to do that.
So I would not put this movie in the category of the shoot and cry Iraq War movies, or they're like, oh, we messed it up, or it was incompetently prosecuted. And in fact, this movie is only about the war in Iraq in a glancing way. I mean, it is about the war in Iraq in a large way, but it doesn't really figure into the plot too heavily. The film we are going to be discussing today is Shooter, starring Mark Wahlberg and directed by Antoine Fuqua of Training Day fame. This is based on the everyone's favorite series of books, the Bob Lee Swagger Point of Impact series, which, Matt, you have actually read.
Not all of them, but I've read a bunch. I read Dirty White Boy when I was in high school. I saw it on a rack at a grocery store, much as I saw American Tabloid, and I bought the mass market paperback edition. And the very first paragraph of that book, Dirty White Boy, which is tangentially related to the Bob Swagger books, is describing this terrifying criminal, in a prison who's about to break out, and talking about how he has the largest penis of any white man in the prison.
It's a sign of a great book.
Yeah. He's played by Mark Wahlberg in this movie.
Yeah, but that book actually is that guy with the big penis. Turns out, if you read a bunch more books about in this verse, it really is like a Tolkien-esque world. You find out that he is the illegitimate son of Bob Lee Swagger's father, Earl Swagger, who was an Arkansas state trooper who was assassinated by the CIA from a different book.
The Clinton crime family, once again, back at it.
But so the Bob Lee Swagger is a Vietnam sniper. He was the best sniper in American history. Killed 500 people during the Vietnam War. And then he comes home and he's all, traumatized. He lives alone in the Arkansas hill country, and he just keeps getting dragged back into escapades and shenanigans. And the first of those shenanigans is a book called Point of Impact, which was made later into Shooter. And it was written in the 80s, and so some of the stuff, the plot details are different, but the basic arc of the story is the same. Yeah.
So,
by the way, this is that I wanted to find it. We can put it back. We can edit it back in to make it flow better. But this is I found the first paragraph of Dirty White Boy. The first book by Stephen Hunter I read in high school. 3 men at McAllister State Penitentiary had larger penises than Lamar Pye, but all were black and therefore, by Lamar's own figuring, hardly human at all. His was the
doesn't
largest
count.
Penis. Yep. His was the largest penis ever seen on a white man in that prison or any of the others in which Lamar had spent so much of his adult life. It was a monster, a snake, a ropey, veiny thing that hardly looked at all like what it was, but rather like some form of rubber tubing.
Damn.
Well, the Mark Wahlberg Antoine Fuqua film adaptation has already missed a beat by focusing virtually not at all on Mark Wahlberg's just sort of, I guess, half related giant veiny rubber hose.
It's a damn shame.
Well, I mean, before we get into the movie itself, like I said, like I wanted to discuss this movie because it is one of the only movies I can think of to come out of the Bush era that is a sort of a left-wing stab at making like an 80s style action movie. And I gotta say,
yeah,
it pretty much works. Like I was rewatching this movie again. I was like, you know what? Like this pretty much slaps. And it's layered with all kinds of conspiracy-pilled little Easter eggs for you. So, I mean, what did you guys make of Shooter?
Well, I've always like loved this movie. Like it's probably like the last movie like this we'll ever really see, unless we get to make Loop Jumper, where it is like, yeah, you can enjoy it like you enjoy John Wick, where there is like actually pretty cool action, and it's like for as much as there is a plot, it's pretty fun. But it is, you know, they are saying like the deep state and like the petroleum industry is evil. And it's like, we're probably just not going to see that again. They would absolutely not do a movie where like, yeah, there's just an ex-military guy who's going around like fucking doming intelligence directors and senators. Like, they would have to fuck up so bad for that for Hollywood, for them to like call the lizard men in Hollywood and be like, okay, make one of those to like release the pressure valve a little bit. Everything is run by algorithms now. So there's like a certain ceiling and a certain floor where this movie can't be made.
I liked it at the time, but I did spend most of the time just having my arms folded, just like this tiny T-Rex armed mass hole is not Bob Lee Swagger. I'm sorry.
It was like when they cast Tom Cruise as Jack
like
Reacher.
A gimme capped hillbilly is just, it doesn't play.
I think in real life, if a guy did this in real life, which I am not endorsing, I do not think you should do this. It would be like a 5'7" mass hole, because he's like unassuming, and if you saw that guy carrying like a huge duffel bag with like a Barrett 50 cal, you would be like, oh, that's like his equipment to play in the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. He wants to play some type of like electric harp on a clock tower during the president's speech. That's fine. Well, I'll let him do that.
Well, I mean, I do remember when this movie came out. Like going back into my total recall for conservative media, I remember Jonah Goldberg of the National Review complaining about this movie when it came out, because he was just like, they killed Dick Cheney. They think it's a conspiracy movie about how the oil industry controls our government, and they just want to kill Dick Cheney. And you
would be mad too if like your mom lets you watch one violent movie a month and you wasted it on this one.
Seeing your best friend from the government get killed.
Yeah. What the fuck? My mom won't let me have a do-over. I have to wait till next month.
Well, I mean, for whatever reason, like the stars aligned, and this is why I think it is an interesting movie, because they 1000% just domed Dick Cheney in this movie. So let's just build up to that point. This is okay. So Shooter opens. And the very first thing you see in this movie is like a long, like helicopter tracking shot, like coasting over this landscape that we later find out is in the Horn of Africa, a very kinetic theater of operations when it comes to U.S. Special Forces, CIA contractors, and various bad people. But the very first thing you see in this movie is an oil pipeline. The camera follows the oil pipeline up, up an embankment, and there's just like at sort of a cliff ledge, we find Mark Wahlberg and his spotter. They are Marine Scout Recon snipers, which are, if you're into that kind of thing, is, by all accounts, the best of the best when it comes to scouting, spotting, and shooting. They are there to provide sort of like Overwatch. They're there to provide sniper cover for some unspecified military operation that's going on. Like I said, in what I believe is revealed to be the country of Ethiopia. They're either in Ethiopia or Eritrea, but either way, they're not officially supposed to be there. So, basically what happens is, as you might expect, on the sniper mission, shit goes sideways. Shit goes sideways, and because they're not officially supposed to be in the country, they are abandoned. They are cut off by the guys in the rear, spotting shit with drones, and like all their cover is gone, and they are left to fend for their own and ward off the assault of these some militia group that they just like domed like 60 of them from like 5,000 yards away or something. I mean, like Mark Wahlberg in this movie is Steph Curry, right? I mean, he's just draining, he's draining threes, like just hole in one every single time. And in the course of this mission going sideways, it's like, they're supposed to cover some guys, but then they don't account for like, oh, there's another force of guys coming. There's too many guys, not enough, no exit strategy for them. And as a result of it, his spotter and best friend is killed during this unofficial op. They're expendable, and it's never good when you're one of these guys and you find out that you are expendable. I will note a little Easter egg for Wahlberg heads out there. His spotter and best friend is named Donnie, just like Mark Wahlberg's real life brother, Donnie Wahlberg. And I just wonder if that was just Mark and the filmmakers just having a little fun with the audience. So the mission in Africa goes sideways. His spotter is killed, but Bob Lee Swagger, aka Shooter, he's able to make it out alive, and then the film jumps ahead in time like 3 years, and we come across Shooter is now 3 years on. He's out of the military, and he is basically he's become a ponytail guy living off the grid in Montana, and he's sort of a gritty survivalist type. And that because like his only friend is a dog, and his dog is trained to bring him beers from the refrigerator. But in one of my favorite scenes in the movie, like where we see Wahlberg and he's living in his like Montana compound, and they're like, oh, he shoots his own meat and grows his own vegetables, and he doesn't trust the government anymore. And that's sort of illustrated by Wahlberg. He comes into the house, his dog gets him a beer. He gives the dog some beer, and then he boots up the World Wide Web. And as soon as he looks at his computer, he goes, "Let's see what lies they're trying to sell us today."
And like that scene. When I saw that scene, it was like, oh, they like literally wouldn't do this today. If they did Shooter today, it would be about like a brave Marine who's defending journalists.
Well, see that's the thing is that a lot of that energy that the anti-establishment disillusion energy that was channeled by this movie, and that Hunter expressed in a lot of his books before like 2008 or so, has just been funneled into QAnon and general suspicion of authorities, that because of the rise of Trump and everything, the people who make people who make movies are way too devoted now in protecting against them. And so they just make the alienation worse by not even giving people a fucking vent, by being like, no, actually, the journalists are always good.
Yeah, they've literally...
And the CIA and the government are on your side.
They've made several movies that like try to be like Shooter for journalists.
Yes.
There is no... Like, okay, there's definitely like no real-life Bob Lee Swagger, but there's more of a chance of there being a Bobby Lee Swagger, like, former Marine than there is any type of Bobby Lee Swagger journalist. That just doesn't exist.
There's no swagger. Another detail in this scene where he's like, let's see what lies they're trying to sell us today is on his desk, he does have a copy of the 9/11 Commission report. Now, is this movie 9/11 pilled? I don't know. I mean, not explicitly, but it raises enough issues in the plot of the movie to think that, what are they really trying to tell us here? What are they really trying to tell? Well,
talk about something that would never, like, there's so much in this movie. Pretty much every shot has a thing where it's like, oh, now this would be called evil disinformation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now this movie, like anything in this movie that actually does like, where they're not explicitly saying like, oh yeah, they put termite paint on the buildings, like something ridiculous like that. But they are saying like, okay, well, think about like what specifically the security state allows to happen. If you did like, this is, now the perspective on these things is like, if you know someone who even says that, you should contact the FBI. That's the popular liberal position on it.
Well, Shooter, aka Bob Lee Swagger, does not get much time to lounge in his man cave with his dog friend, because who comes driving up his driveway? None other than Danny Glover. But before he's introduced, and it just cuts to Langley. It's Langley, Virginia. We all know it's our friends at the agency, and it's a bunch of guys sitting around a room, and they've got their file open, and the manila folder is filled with nothing but Bob Lee Swagger. They want him for an unspecified mission, and they roll up his driveway asking him to, come back into the fold. Now, remember during Richard Jewell, we talked about the scene where it's like John Hamm, and as soon as they get your photo on the whiteboard, it's like it's over for you. So as soon as Bob Lee Swagger's photo is in their little dossier, he's fucked. So, and then also, I think it's cool that Danny Glover is the bad guy. He's this like very vaguely associated army colonel who's just like black bag fucking like just like decades long fucking career doing ops for the fucking CIA. I think it's cool that Glover is in this role because, Glover, as far as Hollywood actors go, is about as bona fide a lefty as you can find. And I think Glover had a certain relish playing this fucking CIA colonel character.
He had a great time in this role. It is a pleasure every time he's on scene because it's like, yeah, I mean, there are probably other actors that would have done like a pretty good job, but he does a great job because he's like, no, yeah, I uniquely know that the CIA was trafficking drugs, that they're fucking abducting people, that they're doing all this shit. And he really fucking has fun with it.
Glover is a great villain in this movie, and essentially,
yeah.
So like they pull up his driveway. They got like the government fucking black SUVs, and Wahlberg's like, keep on driving. I ain't interested in what you're selling. But Glover buffaloes him by pulling out a Medal of Honor and being like, "Oh, your dad had a Medal of Honor. Check this out. I have one too. Don't you want to hear what I have to say?" And he gets under all of Shooter's natural paranoia, anger, hatred of the government. He gets right under his skin by pulling the old patriotism card. And what he tells him is that they need him to plan the assassination of the president of the United States, not execute it, merely plot out every detail about, hey, if you were to perhaps want to assassinate the president of the United States, how would you go about doing it? Because we have some, unspecified foreign intel that says that there's a shooter in the country and he's going to take a shot at the president sometime over the next couple weeks at one of 3 public speaking engagements that the president is scheduled to do from over like 1,000 yards. And at that distance, there's like 5 or 6 guys in the world who could reliably pull the trigger and hit the target on a shot like that. And Bob Lee Swagger is one of them. So they're saying, we need a guy with your mind to help us get in the mind of this unspecified shooter and help us stop the assassination of the president. And they're like, he's like, do you want to wake up next week and find the president has been shot and killed and you couldn't, if you could have done something about it and you didn't. And Mark Wahlberg says to him, he's like, I don't much care for this president. Don't much care for the one before him either. He's like, he's disillusioned by politics, but he still feels the pull because he is a, hoorah, semper fi, Marine Scout recon sniper. He still feels the pull of that, of the red, white, and blue and the Constitution and the idea that, all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, for a guy who's already paranoid and like living off the grid and has been fucked over by the government one time before, and whose name is Bob Lee Swagger, just about the most presidential assassin name ever given to a human being, I kind of feel like he, and of course you, the audience, you sort of know what's coming here as soon as he says yes to these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if people are already referring to you by your 3 names, it's like, What do you think you're going to be framed for, buddy?
Yeah, they just tell him you're one of 5 guys in the world who can like shoot a politician from like a mile away, and they're like, oh yeah, no, we want you to stop someone from doing that. I'd like to shout out as well. Danny Glover's goon in this movie is played by Elias Koteas, who's a very slimy sort of evil henchman in this movie. And one of the first thing he does is Mark Wahlberg's dog doesn't like him. And Elias Koteas, being a consummate Fed, as soon as you see Wahlberg's dog, he just starts reaching for his sidearm.
Yes, there are so many great character actors in this movie. Like, if you were making a movie, possibly inspired by this movie, about a time traveling Bob Lee Swagger, you would just go down the IMDb for this movie.
Yeah. So, and I think interesting. One of the things, like when they're, Wahlberg initially, Shooter initially says no to them. He's like, I don't want nothing to do with the damn government anymore. And as they're leaving in the Fed black SUV, Elias Koteas is like, oh, like the guy turned us down, and Danny Glover's like, oh no, he said yes, he just doesn't know it yet. And what he says is that Shooter Bob Lee Swagger has basically if you look at his file, he's a man with a history that says duty, honor, and patriotism. But because of the incident in the Horn of Africa, where duty, honor, and patriotism led to, having his friend be killed and him betrayed, when you lose that sense of that system of belief, when that collapses, you don't know where to turn to or what to do. Well, when you become vulnerable like that, you certainly make an interesting target for men like Danny Glover and the agency to, let's just say, fill the void where that sense of honor, duty, and patriotism once was. So, of course, Shooter Bob Lee Swagger is going to come out of retirement, and he is going to help Glover and his team stop this supposed assassination of the President of the United States. So, he scopes out the locations, and he determines that there is only one location in which the president could be assassinated in this manner, and that is in Philadelphia, appropriately, because it's the only city in America where you could do something like that and get away with it.
Yeah.
You can assassinate the president by hucking a battery at his head.
The president is a Giants fan, and he's going to speak at Independence Hall, and let's just say things are going to happen. So, this whole time, the president shows up, but speaking before the president is the Archbishop of Ethiopia, and this is sort of like a Desmond Tutu like character. And but before he gets on stage, we are introduced to Michael Peña's character, who is an FBI agent who's just on the scene. He's there to work the president being in town, and of course he's going to become a main character in this movie. But here's the first big conspiracy Easter egg in this movie. So while Wahlberg is set up with Danny Glover and Elias Koteas and all the CIA guys at their little Overwatch position, and they all have binoculars, and he's like, the shooter's loading the gun right now. We got to take him out. Where's the police? What's going on here? They bring in a local Philadelphia police officer who's their man on the scene. And he's this sweaty fat guy who's already nervous. His gun is already unsnapped, which Wahlberg clocks instantly. The name of the Philadelphia police officer, I don't know if you guys caught this, is Officer Timmons. Now, if you can tell me that this isn't an absolute reference to Officer J.D. Tippit, the officer and probably cutout and handler for Lee Harvey Oswald, who was killed by him, hours before Oswald was arrested in that movie theater. I don't know. I got a bridge to sell you. I've got a presidential assassination plot I'd like you to plan for me. So we've got Officer J.D. Tippit, who's it's an honor to meet you. It's an honor to meet you, Shooter. And, he's sweaty. Oh,
Eagles.
He's sweaty. Something's up. And then, as it gets closer to the president taking the stage, Wahlberg's he's like, what's the matter? We got to arrest this guy. He's the shooter. What's going on? And then, of course, Officer J.D. Tippit shoots him in the back right after not the president, but the Archbishop of Ethiopia gets fucking his wig split. And he's standing he's standing next to the president. So it is interpreted as a failed assassination attempt on the president. But Archbishop of Ethiopia, he is no more. And Wahlberg
in the book, which is written in the 80s, it's sort of an Oscar Romero type Catholic prelate from Central America.
Right. Well, I mean, again, you
was when we were just going to town down there. It was basically about the El Mozote massacre. The book was.
Well, the massacre that this movie's about, like I said, takes place in the Horn of Africa, which is, very fitting for both, the time this movie came out and now as well. The Horn of Africa is like one of the biggest theaters of like covert involvement for U.S. Special Forces, the CIA, et cetera, et cetera. So the Archbishop is assassinated by an unknown shooter. But like instantly as that happens, Officer J.D. Tippett attempts to, snip those loose ends and kill shooter Bob Lee Swagger. But
how could you fucking miss?
He is not. Come on. This guy's a Philly cop. He's not a good shooter. He's fucking.
No.
He's sweating cheesesteak. He fucks it up. Swagger gets away and is immediately the subject of like a nationwide manhunt. There's actually like the scene of him getting away. I thought was really well done because there's like 10,000 helicopters in the skies over Philly looking for him. They're all like sweeping around. It's like all very well filmed. And also what I appreciated about this scene and this whole sequence is that it really does take seriously like how bad it is to get hit with even 2 like small caliber bullets in non-lethal areas. Cause like he has to run away, steal a car, and then like do surgery on himself. And what I liked about this movie is that it showed that there are like 3 different stages of him doing self-suck on himself to like not bleed to death. And I thought it was like a pretty realistic, pretty high stakes, sort of like it was a very taut scene of him having to escape and also not bleed to death from his various gunshot wounds. But he is only able to escape because in fleeing the scene of his setup, he comes across Michael Pena, who's just this dipshit FBI agent fresh out of the academy, just going like, woo, like all good, checking in here. And Wahlberg, of course, immediately gets the drop on him, steals his gun, handcuffs, and car, but not before telling him, and this is the only person he gets a chance to talk to, this lonely FBI agent played by Michael Pena. He says, it's a setup. I didn't shoot the president. So he is able to escape Philadelphia. And is now
which is all the most heroic thing he does in the movie. Get out of Philadelphia. Yeah. They were gonna make him dress up like Gritty and Crump. They framed him. They were like, you have to say that Gritty's socialist. Say that you tried to kill the president. And he was like, no.
He fucked around and found out.
Yeah.
No, he's bleeding. He needs to get off the streets. There's only one where to go in Philadelphia. That's Baltimore Matt's house. If you want to remove a bullet from you and maybe take a leak.
Yeah.
Bob Lee Swagger is able to get away. Sort of stitched up their whole plans, and then we see Officer J.D. Tippett is like being interviewed on the news, and they're like, "Oh, he was able to. He saw his gun sticking out of a window and was able to, shoot him in the process of apprehending him." A very, very familiar playbook we're talking about here. Very, very familiar. But of course, Michael Pena, FBI agent, now has to look like a huge pussy in front of like everyone else in the agency. And they're like, you disgrace the agency. You're going up for the Office of Professional Review. And I sort of like the scene where Pena was like, I just graduated the academy 2 weeks ago, and you're saying that this guy is a Marine Scout sniper with like 500 confirmed kills. Like, what do you mean? Like, what the fuck would you have done? I'm lucky to be alive. Oh, sorry, I didn't defeat him in hand-to-hand combat, like the most dangerous guy on the planet. Oh, well. But because he gets sunned so badly by his shithead superiors at the FBI, one of whom is played by Tate Donovan. I know you guys are a fan of his work from The OC as America's favorite dad from Orange County.
And as Ray's younger brother on a program of that name.
But because he's so... Something doesn't sit right with Michael Pena's character. Now, here would be a good time to talk about the name of Michael Pena's character, which is very odd until something clicks. The name of Michael Pena's character is Nicholas Memphis, which is a very odd name for any human being, but it's also a very odd name to give a character and an actor who's like a very prominent Hispanic American. Like, you think they would have given him something a little bit more fitting than Nicholas Memphis, which sounds like a porn star's name. I was like, what's up with that? Until, what's the last name? What's that city again? Memphis? Was there another famous assassination that happened in Memphis involving the FBI?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was. I think it is a coded reference to the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination and the FBI's, shall we say, I don't know, the cloud that hovers over that regarding the FBI and that assassination and the shooter involved in it, who perhaps was also a patsy. Speaking of James Earl Ray, another three-named sort of like cracker shooter who I personally think fits a way more open and shut case on like textbook patsy than even Lee Harvey Oswald. So like I said, I think the filmmakers of this movie they're not putting their thumb all the way on the scale, but they are hinting at a lot of what this movie implies and what they're really trying to say with this action movie. So there's another really good scene of Mark Wahlberg doing self-suck on himself. He uses a turkey baster to like fill his veins with sugar water, and Michael Pena, he's like, oh, like a hardware store, like, you know, someone bought sugar water from them, and I think he's an Age of Napoleon listener or something, because he's like, they've been using sugar water to treat battlefield wounds since the Napoleonic era, and they're like, shut up, loser, go back to clocking phone calls.
Yeah, they're like, we listen to true crime podcasts at the Bureau, you fucking pussy.
So then
check out ageofnapoleon.com.
So then Bob Lee Swagger is, of course, on the run. He's like the most wanted man in the world. So he's got to turn to someone for help. And of course, like a good Marine, who are you going to turn to? The wife of your dead friend, who you've never met even once. He just shows up at her house and he's like, you got to help me. I didn't kill the president. And then she's like, of course you didn't kill the president, you idiot. You killed the Archbishop of Ethiopia. She's played by Kate Mara. And, you know, like, of course she helps him. Of course she believes him. Because, you know, I mean, like, her character's psychology is funny because, like, his face is all over the news. She's never even met this guy. The only thing she knows about him is that, like, he was with her husband when he died in the line of duty. And then he just shows up and everyone's like, oh, like, he's the most wanted assassin in the world. And he's like, you got to believe me, I didn't do it. And she's like, okay, I'll help you. And she's...
Well, no one said, like, military wives, like, they're not praised for being smart. Like, they're praised for being, like, you know, strong and nice. But not smart.
Well, I mean, she is smart because, you know, she trusts that, you know, he is on the level, and that she's smart enough to know that, hey, the lying fake news media, if they're you know, doing everything possible to make you think that this guy's the shooter, maybe he's not. So of course she helps him, she stitches him up, and, you know, he's back to fighting shape, and he knows that he needs to take down Danny Glover and the people who set him up. Oh, and then also, he finds out through Kate Mara's character that the news included in the account that they killed his dog. The dog that he trained from birth to fetch beers for him from the fridge. Elias Koteas made good on his threat and killed Mark Wahlberg's dog. And then it planted a news story about, like, he even killed his dog because he knew he wasn't coming back. And now it's like, okay, I mean, if these people weren't marked for death before, I mean, come on, just dig your own grave right now, homie. You played yourself. They killed his fucking dog.
This is like John Wick gets a lot from this movie. And, you know, they basically do John Wick. But whereas John Wick is like in service of like lore about a secret hotel, like, you know, this is about the deep state. This is about JFK. This is about the MLK assassination. This is about everything.
And then, you know, as this is going on, Michael Pena's character, Nicholas Memphis, is beginning to sort of cotton to the idea that, like, maybe the story here that, like, his bosses are so wed to aren't adding up. Because, like, when they debrief him after, like, they make extra, they give him the full court press to leave out from his, like, official write-up of the incident that shooter told him in the moment that this is a setup, I didn't kill the president. And then he begins to notice things like how come is it that our FBI field office had like every single piece of information about Bob Lee Swagger like 20 minutes after he supposedly pulled the trigger? He's like, he's getting conspiracy pilled on what's going on here, and the fact that and he figures out that like Mark Wahlberg is like the best sniper in world history. So like, how could he miss a shot by 2 feet? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So I mean, he begins to. Pena and him, they become allies. And they become allies because shooter Bob Lee Swagger uses him as bait to like lure the deep state assassins out of the muck, because they know they're looking for him and he's got to get them to show themselves. So he does that by exposing Michael Pena to their scrutiny or whatever. And they abduct him. And in probably one of my favorite details of this movie, they abduct him, they torture him and interrogate him to get what he knows about their plot. And then they I swear to God, I've never seen this in a movie before or since. And it's another one of those things that like really make you go, They break out this like bizarre saw type contraption to get him to shoot himself in the head. It's like a neck brace and like an arm. It's like an arm crank, like neck medical device that like pulls your hand towards your head with a gun in it and then makes you pull the trigger so that forensically it will look like you pulled the trigger on yourself. And the guy's doing this.
Yeah.
The guy's doing this to him and go, it's not the first time we've done this. It works. And I was just sort of going, interesting.
I know. I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, "Damn, that could work." Is that a device? Is that a real thing?
I was like, "This makes sense." I was like, "Fuck!" I was just like going through my head
people
of like all these
love
people
just shooting themselves in the head when they're like very close to being interviewed for conspiracy-related cases. It's a very common thing that happens.
But but before they can use the suicide device on Michael Pena, of course, this was all just bait, because shooter Bob Lee Swagger domes like 6 guys with a .22 caliber rifle from a canoe he's sitting in. That's how good a shooter this shooter is. So then him and Pena team up. He's got a new spotter now. And where do they go? And like, okay, so right after my favorite bit of conspiracy lore in this movie regarding the suicide device, we get a wonderful cameo performance in this movie of the great Levon Helm. Probably, I would say, one of the best musicians turned actors. You may remember him from The Coal Miner's Daughter and The Right Stuff. In this movie, he plays a Tennessee legend who's just an old man who lives in Tennessee and knows a lot about guns and is friends with Bob Lee Swagger. This was probably like my favorite scene in the movie, my favorite role in the movie. Levon Helm is a joy in this role as the old Tennessee gunsmith who hips Pena and Wahlberg to the idea that you can wrap an already fired shell casing in paper and fire the same casing through a different gun and have the grooves on the casing match what the gun it was originally fired from. So this is how they set up Wahlberg to be like, it's his rifle, his bullet fired from this gun. It's 1,000% link. And Levon Helm, I'll point out that during this scene, Michael Pena is wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. and there's a great line where Levon Helm says of the government and the media, he said,
they also said that artificial sweeteners were safe and WMDs were in Iraq and Anna Nicole married for love.
And then he says that like this is the way it always works in a conspiracy.
That's how conspiracy works. Them boys on the grassy knoll, they were dead within 3 hours. Buried in the damn desert, unmarked graves out past Terlingua.
You know this for a fact?
Still got the shovel.
This is definitely the most Stephen Hunter part of the movie. He also loves gunsmiths. He loves anybody who's good making or firing guns. In fact, he has a really insane book called Pale Horse Coming about Bob Lee Swagger's dad in the 50s liberating a prison in Arkansas that's being used to test nuclear syphilis on black inmates. And he does it with the help of a Dirty Dozen team of famous gunsmiths, all of whom are based on real guys.
That sounds
He's like an
fucking
absolute
awesome.
weeb for guns.
Yeah, that sounds sick.
Can we buy the rights to that movie? Can we buy the rights to that book?
It's all. No, I'm sorry. It's Gunsmiths and then a thinly veiled Audie Murphy.
That fucking owns. God damn.
That's so fucking sick.
testing radioactive syphilis on African American inmates in the Arkansas prison system. I mean, not too much of a stretch.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Wow. Yeah. No, that's another thing that isn't really talked about that much in most media. The American government, beyond even Tuskegee, testing biological warfare on Black Americans.
Korean War. Let's go down that whole rabbit hole. But so basically, they realized that so there's Mark Wahlberg, Bob Lee Swagger wasn't the real shooter. So there's another shooter, and they find out. They realize because obviously Levon Helm is he knows personally the 3 other guys on the planet who could have theoretically made that shot. And wouldn't you know it, shooter Bob Lee Swagger has already met one of them. And it's a guy you wouldn't think because there's this obvious, is played by character actor Rage Sherbega, who you may remember from Snatch and Eyes Wide Shut as the guy who tries to pimp out his daughter to Tom Cruise. But when this guy shows up in the movie, he's the bad guy. He's the bad guy, but he's in a wheelchair. So they're like, oh, how did he make the shot? Well, they did it using a robot of some kind. They do it with a computer program and a stationary, computer mounted and aimed rifle apparatus. But I guess Sherbega's character is the one who typed in the coordinates to make sure the shot goes off successfully. So he becomes the focus of now the deep state and Danny Glover and now Ned Beatty, who's introduced as Ned Beatty, R.I.P. to another legend. He comes in as a senator from Montana, who is our very thinly veiled Dick Cheney analog. And now they realize they're being hunted by Bob Lee Swagger, and the way that they're going to draw him out is similar to what Bob Lee Swagger did with Michael Pena's character. They're going to sort of dangle out Rage Sherbega there to sort of flush him out. So this sets up. They're gonna they know where he is. He his sort of ranch house in Virginia. It's just Michael Pena and Mark Wahlberg alone are going to do a raid on this guy, and what they know to be for certain is a trap designed to do exactly that, to get them to go for this guy. And this leads to one of my favorite things that can happen in an action movie: a shopping trip to Home Depot where the principals blow racks, buy out the store, and use common household and yard work appliances to make a host of homemade bombs, booby traps, and weapons. So they make a shitload of tear gas, napalm, and pipe bombs and improvised explosives with common items that can be found in any supermarket in America. And they set up for a big raid on this guy's house. And they do it. It's an awesome action sequence. A lot of really good stealth knife kills by Bob Lee Swagger before the shit really pops off. But when he finally is face to face or gun to face with Rage Sherbega, he sort of spills the whole truth to him. And what he says to him is very interesting. He says, the truth is that nothing, no matter how horrible, happens without the approval of our government, either here or over there. And he uses Abu Ghraib as an example. And the character he's portraying is a fucking true war criminal. It probably implied a sniper in the Bosnian War or something like that, who, like Bob Lee Swagger, has been approached by Danny Glover at one point and given, let's just say, a choice to be recruited or not. He says, yes, nothing happens over there or here, no matter how horrible, without the knowledge and approval of the government. He says, there's no head to cut off because it's a conglomerate. And if one man betrays the principles of the accrual of money and power, then everyone else betrays him. It's human weakness, and you can't kill that with a gun. And in doing so, he lets Wahlberg know that in the very first scene in the movie, where he covers the retreat of these operators in the Horn of Africa, he was in fact covering a group of military contractors who had just executed an entire village of people and buried them in a mass grave because they didn't want a pipeline to be built through their ancestral homelands. So, and he was he was never meant to leave the Horn of Africa alive.
If you want to have someone who looks very much like a human beat explain how capitalism actually works, you get Ned Beatty.
There is so much I love about this stretch of the movie. First, I love stealth knife kills in movies. We don't see enough of them. I love like a CQC takedown. Fucking awesome. If you do something where you kick out the back of someone's knee and then jam the knife into their carotid artery and put your fucking hand over your mouth and then you see a little blood seep through the fingers, amazing. But yeah, again, this movie's dead on because a lesser film and a lot of lesser films that follow this movie's they're in this movie's general sphere, it would be like, oh, there's one big guy. You know, we have to take down the big fucking Dick Cheney guy. This movie understands, no, you kill him, 10 other fucking ambitious psychos are rising up to take its place. This is basically automated at this point.
So, I mean, him and Pena take out like an entire fire team of operators who like are converge on this property and get fucking shredded by homemade napalm and pipe bombs. It's pretty awesome. He takes out a helicopter by shooting a giant propane tank, and like all the guys hanging off the sides with machine guns get cooked alive. It's pretty hard body. It's pretty hard body.
That scene, them getting cooked in the helicopter, it felt like the filmmakers were saying this is payback for Waco. To specifically kill them that way, like fucking tight.
So, I mean, like, you know, we don't have to belabor too much. This all leads to the final showdown because, of course, Danny Glover and his minions have connected Kate Mara's character to Bob Lee Swagger, and they, of course, kidnapped her. And Elias Koteas' character gives off severely rapey vibes when he is like menacing Kate Mara. Very, very nasty, very gross character. She is their hostage now, and if Bob Lee Swagger would like her back alive, then they have to arrange a sort of a handoff of the evidence that Bob Lee Swagger has. He recorded Rage Sherbega when he was talking about their plan the atrocity that they committed in Ethiopia on behalf of sitting U.S. Senator Ned Beatty. And Bob Lee Swagger says, okay, like we'll do the handoff, but Ned Beatty has to be there. And they like take a helicopter up to like the top of a fucking mountain. So like it's all snow capped, it's all in white, so that there's like no chance that he can like, you know, get the drop on them, or they can see him coming, right? Because he's Shooter. Folks, he's Shooter. All right? You know, he does one thing. And you know it's gonna be sniping. So suffice to say, by the end, Mark Wahlberg shoots through the fucking telescopic lens about 3 different guys who are like all have positions. Like, you know, like he gets the drop on all of them. Elias Koteas' character has one of the best movie deaths that I've seen recently, where he's got a shotgun to Kate Mara's back, and he's like, "You got no shot, Shooter. You got no shot." And then Mark Wahlberg then shoots his hand off. His hand is on the trigger. He shoots him with like a 50 caliber bullet and like explodes his hand, and then shoots his arm off after that. So Elias Koteas is like, he took the shot. He's like, you took the shot, Shooter. You did good. Ha ha ha. And then he fires another shot, and his whole arm just gets blown off his body.
This is where Modern Warfare 2 took you shooting off that guy's arm. I'm convinced. Because, you know, again, a lesser movie would just show like the exit wound of like, you know, 45 at most. This is a movie that will show, using a Barrett 50 cal, using anti-material rounds, to literally explode body parts. Amazing. Would not happen today. This happens today. Shooter is like, he finds some ancient relic and shoots lasers out of his fucking hands.
And even if he did do it, god damn it, you know it would be CGI.
Yep.
And it would look like dog shit.
This is a very good
effects, baby.
Very good bloody stump. Fucking just meat flying off this asshole. So of course,
this is why whenever I go on a Hinge date, this is the movie I watch with girls horriblessly. They don't make them like this anymore.
So of course, you know,
just kidding. I only do that with Casino.
So you know, Shooter of course reveals his position. It would seem that they have now, you know, they're holding all the cards when it comes to Ned Beatty and Danny Glover. But you know, Shooter's no dummy. What he does, he burns the evidence that he has, the tape recording, because he's like, this is too hot. There's nobody, like, the evidence that's on this tape is so damning that there's nobody we can give it to because it'll just mark us for death. Like the FBI, nobody's going to help us with this shit. Destroying it is like our only, like, if for me and Kate Mara and like the people we love, this is our only real protection, is destroying this evidence. I mean, I think the kind of the opposite would be true. I would probably hold on to a copy of that recording. But Ned Beatty, of course, like, you know, very network-like, has this monologue at the end of the movie on the top of this mountain where he's like, he says to Gunny, he's like, Gunny, listen, boy, there are no sides. There are no Sunnis, no Shiites, no Republicans, no Democrats. There's just the haves and the have-nots. And do you want to be at the table with the haves, or do you want to be on the outside looking in?
There's only so many places at the table, Gunny. Now, are you on the inside, or are you on the out?
He's like, I'm a senator, boy. Let me tell you, I'm going back to Washington, D.C. And he, like, you know, sort of trundles off back to his helicopter. And Danny Glover's like, guess what, Shooter? I won. You lose. Once again. And so, like, seemingly at the end of this movie, Danny Glover and Ned Beatty get away with it. And Mark Wahlberg is taken into custody, but he is given a chance to have, after he is arrested for assassinating the Archbishop of Ethiopia, or an attempt on the life of the president, he is taken into custody and then given a private audience with the Attorney General of the United States to plead his case. And he's in he's in the orange jumpsuit. He's shackled. And he's like, do you mind uncuffing me? And they're like, yeah, sure. What's the worst that could happen, right?
Yeah.
They unshackle him and bring in his like huge Marine sniper rifle, the one that he allegedly took the shot that killed the Archbishop with. And Michael Pena hands him a bullet, of which he then loads into the breech of this gigantic sniper rifle in a room with the Attorney General, loads it, points it at Danny Glover, and pulls the trigger. But it does not go off. Why? Because as an accomplished and responsible gun mage, Mark Wahlberg, when he left to do the sniper mission, took out all the firing pins on all of his weapons, as he normally does when he leaves his compound for any amount of time. I mean, come on, you're not just going to be leaving Marine sniper rifles around for just anyone to use. And with that amazing demonstration, that is enough for the Attorney General to be like, well, you can leave. You're a free man, which I thought was, you know, perhaps one of the more unrealistic parts of this movie.
Do you think it was an allusion to John Ashcroft sort of passively being against warrantless wiretapping?
I think more than
Probably
anything,
not.
it's proof that there is a limitation to this kind of storytelling in mainstream movies, because you need to have the hero not get fucking murked, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You need to have some sort of satisfying, vindicating ending. And that means that you have to, at the end of the day, appeal to the same institutions and standards and laws that the whole movie has spent its runtime telling you are all fake.
Well, yeah, I do think that, like, this is very rooted in the time that there is still, like, I saw, you know, you would see people who were, like, full-on 9/11 truthers who would still, like, talk about how they had a, you know, little pocketbook of the Bill of Rights. This is, people would go very far, you know, the much beloved based liberals of the past, but there was still, like, this love of America and this belief that if you just worked hard enough, the rules would work for everyone. That's what that type of Oliver Stone liberalism is. It's like, it's not, we have to totally redo the system. It's like, no, the groundwork's great. We just have to apply it to everyone. And also, like, narratively, I do like it, though, because it's like, he's gone through all this, not to change anything, not to really change the world, but this is what you have to do to make the government leave you alone if they've decided that you'll be patsy.
Yeah, and the Attorney General tells him, he's like, look, I don't like the way this shaked out any more than you do, but, you know, this isn't the Old West anymore where you can, you know, clean up the streets with a gun, even though sometimes that's exactly what needs to be done. And this is, of course, after he's given evidence that, you know, Danny Glover, i.e. the U.S. government, did a war crime in Africa, like filled a mass grave with fucking men, women, and children so they could build a fucking oil pipeline. But what he says is, look, this isn't the world court, and I don't have the authority to prosecute Danny Glover for what he may or may not have done overseas. And then, of course, Glover, with his like shit-eating smile, slides out of the room before telling Bob Lee Swagger, shooter, "I win again, you lose." And then it's like, oh, wow, is there no justice in this world? Well, the next scene is they're at Ned Beatty's fucking like hunting lodge in Montana, and they're all having cigars and brandy around the fireplace, going, "Gentlemen, to evil." And they're like, they're like, "I would have loved to see the look on his face when you said that you could kill anyone you want in Africa and there's nothing he could do about it." And then like Ned Beatty literally says, "The truth is what I say it is, boys." And then they're like, "Okay, you're getting on a flight tomorrow. There's the situation in Ecuador with the locals that needs your attention, Danny." And then he's just like, "Well, the situation is solvable as always." And they're yucking it up. They're having a great little victory party for themselves. But come on. You know what's going to happen. You just hear that tink of a glass. You hear that little glass shatter. And yeah, it's a sniper rifle bullet coming straight through the window, fucking taking out all their goons. Because it's just Mark Wahlberg, the Attorney General, was like, boy, it would be a shame if someone took the law into their own hands with a gun and did what did what I wish I could do. And it's Bob Lee Swagger, shooter, doing exactly that. He fucking shoots Danny Glover through the throat with a rifle. One of their other lackeys, who's he just shot in the leg, is just like, "Wait, it wasn't me. I just work for them. I'm not responsible." Domes him in the head. And then probably the last line of the movie is great. Ned Beatty is like, no, wait here a second, boy. No, wait here a second. You don't understand. I'm a sitting United States senator. And Bob Lee Swagger goes, "Exactly." And then just domes him with a 45. And like, yeah,
they won't make this movie unless there's like a thing where like people in office jobs can't access like enough drinking water across the country and not just in America. That won't ever be in a big budget movie again.
And that's why if you look at Stephen Hunter's books, and they kept getting weirder, and I think you can really trace the alienation of like people who are broadly, fixated on like these notions of American heroism and competency, but who are also alienated from the government. They're going from being sort of generalized anti-establishment types, the way that Hunter wrote in the 80s and 90s, to being more like hardcore conservative ideologues as over time. And it really is because, the only real political question becomes one of your cultural affinities. And things like being a badass who really likes guns is coded in such a way that eventually, if you are like that and that like you care about that stuff, you kind of get trundled into, even if you don't want to, into being a conservative. So one of Hunter's more recent books, I think from 2011, is called Soft Target. And it is about Ray Cruz, who is Bob Lee Swagger's illegitimate son, and who took over for Bob Swagger in the books because, at that point, Bob Swagger's in his 60s. He can't be doing all the real hardcore action stuff. He's in the Mall of America when it gets attacked by Somali Muslim fundamentalist terrorists who start just shooting the place up. And he has to just go die hard on them. Meanwhile, outside, the incompetent police response to the shooting is being coordinated by Minnesota State Police Commander Douglas Abobo, the half Kenyan graduate of Harvard Law who got the job because of his fancy speeches and who doesn't know what he's doing and has to get schooled by Ray Cruz on how to really deal with terrorism. Is this character a stand-in or something? I don't get it. Douglas Abobo?
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Yeah. So like he literally has an allegory where the America, it's called, in the book, it's called America the Mall, is under terrorist siege, and incompetent O'Bungler fucks it up, and it's up to a guy with a gun to save everything. And he also wrote a book with Bob Lee Swagger that is one of the most insane plots I've ever encountered. It's about a Yakuza boss who is in charge of like a lot of the pornography in Japan, who is seeking to possess the actual katana that was used to kill the bad guy in the legendary 47 Ronin tale, the real life version, so that he can wield the influence of it to take over the Japanese pornography industry and prevent American actresses from being used in it.
Okay.
They're undermining the purity of Japanese pornography.
Okay. I mean, the Stephen Hunter literary canon is, I think what we've really discovered in this episode is the most untapped gold mine for movies that I think we should produce and write.
We should make all of these films and books into movies. He also, by the way, wrote a Bob Lee Swagger movie about the Kennedy assassination called The Third Bullet.
This is like, that is, the Japanese one speaks to like a very specific type of guy who got a sexual complex while serving in the Philippines. Most of those guys are dead. You know, most of the guys who like, they were like either like before Vietnam or like right after, where they like, you know, they're like, as Matt said, sort of like vaguely like distrustful of the government, army veterans or whatever. And like the main thing they picked up from their military service is like generals are stupid and they're like obsessed with Filipino women. Or they're obsessed with Korean women or Japanese women. Most of those guys got heart conditions. They've passed on. But going back a little bit, the sad thing, about all this is that, like most of the guys that the books were for, they got folded into Trump world. Just like how Alex Jones got shittier after Trump, because it's like, oh, he's just like, he's running like a form of PR for like the Republican frontrunner and then president. But the film version of this, it works twofold. The type of liberal that was, ambiently distrustful of intelligence agencies and shit, and like, as we've long talked about, did a very good job of identifying the problems, not such a good job of identifying the solutions. Yeah, they just became MSNBC viewers. Suddenly they love John Brennan. You all get you get rolled into one thing or the other. Yeah.
Yep, and that means that that all of that current can only be expressed culturally by doctrinaire, like explicitly reactionary stuff now. Like there's no place for a disillusioned sniper to find out that the world is bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm still a little bit left sort of speechless by the power of the idea that a Yakuza boss would seek out the legendary blade of the 47 Ronin like it's the spear of Longinus or something.
Yes.
It will give him the power to prevent Jenna Jameson from taking over the Japanese pornography industry with her buxom blonde assets.
It's degenerate. Letting the blue-eyed devils into the porn industry is the death of Japanese honor.
Well, I would say about this movie, about the death of American honor, is that, again, like back to that last scene where he says, "I'm a sitting U.S. senator," and then Bob Lee Swagger says, "Exactly," before fucking putting a bullet right between his eyes. I mean, like I said at the beginning of this movie, this is a rare piece of Hollywood cinema, and that it came out in 2007, and the movie is, as its conservative critics at the time accurately clocked, an unambiguous wish fulfillment fantasy about capping fucking Dick Cheney. Unambiguous. I mean, there's a scene on the mountain where Ned Beatty's character literally says,
"This is a country where the Secretary of Defense can go on TV and tell the American public, that this is about freedom, it's not about oil."
And no one wants to, and everyone believes it because it's a lie and nobody wants to hear the truth. They talk about Abu Ghraib in this movie. They talk about the WMDs not being in Iraq. And then you have, this senator character in Ned Beatty getting fucking executed by Bob Lee Swagger. And I don't know. It's a rich and powerful text. But like I said, it's just, like a lot of times, like in movies like Independence Day or Armageddon, or like we as Americans, we love to see America get destroyed in movies, but very rarely, like, I mean, it is the special movie in which we, like, a popular movie audience will succumb to willingly the fantasy of seeing specific figures in the American government destroyed for fun and entertainment. And this is what Shooter does splendidly. So,
yeah. I mean, it's like it serves the same purpose culturally as like the carnival of the medieval era. Like, hey, we know that these people rule us without any ability to stop them, but occasionally we can at least watch them get their heads blown open by a cool small man from Massachusetts. And now we can't even have that anymore.
Yeah, no. The only people that like snap anymore are people who are like, yeah, everything's against me. I like, my life is just a cycle of degradation and pain. I'm gonna kill everyone at a frozen yogurt place.
Well, congratulations to Shooter Bob Lee Swagger. Congratulations to Stephen Hunter. Congratulations to Antoine Fuqua for bringing us Shooter. Till next time, gentlemen. Stay frosty. Bye-bye. Stay spotting. Stay scoped
Trigger
up.
Finger lubed.
Stay scoped up. Keep spotting those.
Packed up.
Keep spotting those ops.